Good evening. Welcome to Earth. My name's Christopher, and together with my collaborators Annika and Dean, and many of you here tonight, we're going to be turning this space over the course of the year into a kind of library. We're going to be hosting, amongst other things, a program of residencies. But before I introduce our first resident, I would love to do something with you all, if you're up for it, for our thanks, for our dear friend and collaborator on this project, Dean Kissick, who has spent the last 3 weeks in hospital in London with his mother recovering. And though I hear from Dean that his mum is doing well, I know it's nevertheless been a tough and pretty scary few weeks, both for Yuki and for Dean. And I know how much it'll cheer Dean up to see you all here tonight. So, if you're up for it, what I'd like to do is to record a quick get well soon message with you all for Dean's mum, Yuki. What do you think? You up for it? Okay, cool. Okay, so here's what we'll do. I'm gonna record video, and I'll introduce the message, and then I'm gonna turn the camera around, and it would be super cool if you could all wave at the camera and say, "Get well soon, Yuki." Get well soon, Yuki. Simple, right? Got it? Cool. Okay. Yeah, Dean, I've got some people here that have got a message for your mum. Amazing, beautiful. Thank you so much. So, I don't actually need to introduce Tao Lin, because I know how hard you're all simping for autofiction. But I'm going to keep it short. So, over the last 2 decades, Tao has published around a dozen books, including a memoir and collections of poetry, short stories, and tweets. Tao's first novels, E and Richard Yates, were published by Melville House in 2007 and 2010, respectively. Tao's now legendary third novel, Taipei, was published by Vintage in 2013 and adapted into the 2018 movie High Resolution. Vintage went on to publish Tao's fourth novel, Leave Society, in 2021, and the non-fiction book Trip in 2018, in which Tao chronicled his experiences with psychedelic drugs, including DMT. Speaking of which, Tao will be giving a lecture on DMT, near-death experiences, and the afterlife, right here on Saturday evening. And of course, you're all more than welcome. Same place, same time, this Saturday. But tonight is about MUUMUU House, the independent publishing house that Tao Lin has been running since 2008. And we're delighted to welcome to our modest little stage here August LAMM, Dasha NEKRASOVA, Jordan Castro, Rebecca Gray Sayre, and Writer's Life Tips. And to introduce tonight's readings, I'm going to hand you over to the one and only Mr. Tao Lin.
Hi everyone, thank you for coming. We're going to have 6 readers. Is Rebecca Grace here? Yeah. Okay, good. She's going to be reading first. I'm not sure if we're going to have a break yet. After 3 readers, maybe I'll everyone wants a break, and you can raise your hands, and we'll see about that. All right, Rebecca. Oh, follow her on Substack. It's called Urban Germ.
Thank you. Thanks, Tao, for having me. Is anyone here familiar with the show Meerkat Manor? Aired a while back. Cool. Nice. Some fans. This story is narrated by a guy who accidentally watches Meerkat Manor. It's called Meerkat Manor. Tonight I'm turning feral. The first thing I do is call Ben to let him know. If you need me, I'll be 10 beers deep and sleeping with my jeans on, I say. Better if you don't need me at all. The echo and static from his end suggests I'm on speaker. I hear him take a hit from his elephant-shaped bong, then there's no sound at all. Can you hear me? Ben? I open my mouth and close it. Don't come around for anything dumb. I pull my phone away from my ear and see that it's dead. I consider going upstairs to Ben's half of the duplex to make sure he got my message, but 20 minutes ago, I roofied myself, and I'm beginning to feel the effects. My back is clammy, my head seems smaller, my limbs are foamy and gray. I turn on the TV, drop the remote, and can't bend to get it. I keep envisioning this scene of myself doing a snake maneuver with my jaw and dumping a 48 count of crayons into my mouth. I don't know if it's a memory or if I'm asleep, but more importantly, I don't know how to turn off Animal Planet. They're doing a retrospective tribute to the documentary series Meerkat Manor. The clips of wildlife are narrated by a dramatized reality TV-style script describing all the meerkats as they go about their lives, fucking each other and falling in love and having families. Then the TV starts changing itself. It cycles through Shark Tank, Dateline, and Extreme Chef before it lands on Sesame Street. Ella is yelling at that moldy green man who lives in a trash can, but something's off. Elmo sounds like my dad the time he chewed out a homeless guy for going through our garbage right before him and my mom got divorced, saying stuff like, "This is my trash. Just because the rest of the world goes around sticking their trash in my can doesn't mean I'm okay with it," until my mom came out and started yelling at my dad, and the guy ran off. It'd be easy to blame my parents for my difficulty dating, but my ex-girlfriend said it's something else. My last date had been going fine until I told her a long, desultory anecdote about getting my pants stuck in a vacuum cleaner, which was with a silence so terrifying I had no choice but to fill it with whatever thought came next. "What if I roofied you just now?" I asked. I looked up, surprised to find fear in her eyes. "I'm kidding," I said, "but what's so bad about roofies anyway? They seem kind of fun." She squinted at me aggressively. Women aren't scared of roofies. We're scared of what happens next," she said. I thought her point was sound, but I still felt there was something to be said about the roofies themselves. Even the popular use of the term roofie made them seem unknowable and haunted. But I was prepared to lift the veil. Elmo stops yelling at the trash can man and faces the audience, staring into the camera like he's looking at me directly. He starts laughing and doing a little dance, wagging his hips side to side in this way that I can't help but interpret as mocking. I flip him off and he dances harder. His laugh is several octaves too low, as if the credited voice actor had called in sick. I'm so pissed, I almost don't notice the sound of someone trying to open my front door. I blink and wait for my eyes to adjust to the unlit room beyond the TV glow. I still can't tell if I'm awake, but I'm leaning towards no, because my door is swinging open, and I would never leave it unlocked. A dark silhouette enters my apartment, and I try to shrink further into the couch, but I remain immobile. My pants feel like they're falling down for some reason, and I'm pretty sure I just farted in a really girly way. The fear running through me is so far beyond my comprehension, it's painful, like a bruise penetrating my teeth and chest. I briefly acknowledge that I now understand women better than anyone else in the entire world. The intruder flips the light switch and I get a look at the guy. The intruder appears to be my good friend Ben. "What the fuck, man?" he yells. "It's 3 a.m. I try to talk, but my face isn't responding. Ben looks very far away and shiny. I feel like a shampoo bottle behind a display case. "You gotta turn this shit down. Where's the remote?" Ben starts picking stuff up off the floor. A raw primal instinct deep in my bones tells me Ben can't have the remote. I feel hostile and violent. I'm having thoughts like "be the meerkat" as I watch him clock the remote on the floor right beside my foot. I finally get my vocal cords going and let out a sound like Then I slide off the sofa and form a shield around the remote with my body. Ben, the intruder, is no match against my shield. He's unfocused, his form is weak, he's laughing way too much. I drop my full weight onto the remote and the song on Sesame Street soars. "Fucking move, man, Jesus!" Ben slips a hand under my ribcage and jabs my armpit. I crumple to the side and he trounces me. The remote is his now. He stands, triumphant, and I swing for it. Then he's gone. I swivel my head and find him on the other side of the room, shaking with laughter. He decreases the TV volume and turns to look at me. I think he wants me to speak, and I will. I'm working on it. I'm working on a sentence that will convey all the essential information. Once I've got it, I look into his stoned red eyes, and in a very calm voice I tell him, "Meerkat Manor." But this doesn't seem to help. Ben tilts into the wall and slides down it with his arms bent like a bug, laughing so hard there's not even sound coming out anymore besides this weird clicking noise coming from the back of his throat. He flips to his stomach, presses his nose into the carpet, and lies very still. My thoughts feel buried behind something with a mashed potato texture, and I keep forgetting what I'm trying to remember. Eventually, 2 minor details slip into my purview. 1, that someone has roofied me, and 2, that I bought mushrooms this afternoon and ate them about 3 hours ago. Then the living room's on the move, spinning like a demonic carousel. I try not to puke while the popcorn ceiling twirls around so fast I can't stand. I reach out to Ben, but he can't see me. He hasn't moved at all, and I wonder if we're both dead. Tomorrow, his girlfriend will find us lying in little half-moon shapes right next to each other and think we pulled a gay Shakespeare. They never let men be friends after they die. They always make them fuck. And we'll be no different. They'll write up our secret romance posthumously, and it'll read like a narration on Meerkat Manor. The camera will pan across our extensive family of biohack children and surrogate wives, all running loops around primitive rock-cut tombs as the sun sets hot and gold. Thinking about this, I start to feel sorry for myself. Not because of the gay thing, but because I'm afraid I'll never find that kind of love in this version of my life. Cool, that's it, thanks. I'm gonna read one more. This one, some of you may be familiar with already. It was on MUUMUU House a few months ago. It's called "This Is Water." Once upon a time, there were 2 fish swimming along, a girl fish and a boy fish, and they swam past a wise older fish who nodded to them and said, "Morning, fishers. How's the water?" And the boy fish rolled his eyes and said, "We already know. We already read that speech by David Foster Wallace, and we know what this is. This is water, right? Am I right?" The wise older fish nodded a little, and the boy fish went on. "And next you're going to tell me the grocery store is water, and my job is water, and the commute is water, and my credit score is water. And let me guess, my girlfriend here is water too, huh?" And the wise older fish just kept nodding and saying, "Shit, well, yeah. I suppose that's water too." Until the boy fish started taunting him a little, saying, "Well, you know what else is water? You know what else I think is water?" And then he pulled a gun out of his pants and started waving it around, pointing at fishes' heads, that kind of thing. And his girlfriend gasped and grabbed his arm and said, "Oh my God, stop it, stop!" And then she turned and pressed her lips together in a half smile, half frown at the wise older fish and said, "I'm so sorry, he's had a bit too much." But the boy fish just kept going, raising his voice even louder and lifting the gun over his head, saying, "Well, if everything's fucking water," He brought the gun down against his temple, and the girlfish shrieked and lunged, and the boyfish shot, but there were no bullets. "Shit," he yelled. He careened left to get a bullet loaded while the girlfish reached for the gun. She snagged it, then dropped it, and all three fish watched it float down real jello slow for a second. Then the boyfish and the girlfish raced to grab it, but the boyfish was faster. He swiped it off the seafloor and tried once more to get the thing pointed at his head, but it slipped in his fins as he pulled the trigger, and he shot off half his hairline and shouted, "Ah, fuck!" And the girlfish screamed and said, "Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god," and swam toward him, and he pushed her away with one fin while holding his bleeding scalp with the other, and the wise older fish laughed and laughed and laughed. Cool, thank you.
The next writer's life tips is going to be introduced by his literary agent.
I'm worried for you guys. It's so hot in here. So my client, Mr. Tips, wants to first of all thank you for coming to this reading this evening. I'm his new literary agent, Mr. C. Blegg. My agency, the Blegg Agency, it's brand new. You may not have heard of it. But the Blegg family we're very super old money type. We're very respected in the literary world. And we could not be prouder of our new client, Mr. Tips. We're very selective about who we take on in terms of clients. We only take on really big clients capable of garnering really big book deals, sort of a Sally Rooney or a Tao Lin or a Sean Thornton-Rowe or a Tesha Marshfay or a Madeline Cash sort of level deal. But as soon as Mr. Leiter sent us his work, we heard big cash registers go off, which sounds great. So we knew we had found another Irish literary cash cow. And we were frankly shocked that no other high-powered agent or group of agents had hopped on this guy, this wunderkind, this literary comet burning through the atmosphere. But when Mr. Tips submitted his work to the big agencies in the city, he hadn't bothered. He was actually snubbed by all of them, but not us. In fact, we saw it and we loved it. And for any of you guys who might live under a rock or in Bushwick or Ridgewood, you might not know about my client. He's a successful right-wing writer of experimental political fiction, who is also a pickup artist, a member of the DSA, and also a Buddhist transhumanist technocrat with a taste for the finer things in life. I think his train just got in. So, he's here. So, traveling all the way from Dexter, New York, please welcome my new cash cow, Writer's Life Tips.
Hey guys, I'm just going to read a couple classics from my Substack. You guys should subscribe at writerslifetips.substack.com. This one's called 13th. I read the other day that Abraham Lincoln abolished slavery with the 13th Amendment, and I made a face of cartoonish shock and awe, pretending that the fact struck me as impossible, and called my wife over immediately. "This can't be," I said. "Honey, you have to see this." She came over and I repeated what I had read. Yeah, she said. What about it? Well, when does it go into effect? I immediately keeled over laughing, but she stared at me without an iota of humor. She turned and started back toward the kitchen, and I got up to follow her. I had no idea. Babe, this is bad news for you. Can't own someone, can't hit someone, can't tell someone what to do. Were you aware of this? Shut up, she muttered, getting back to making dinner. I could use some help around here. Did you just call me the help? I was wheezing, laughing like a hyena. I wiped a tear from my eye. Oh, that's good. That was good. Yeah, honey, did you know you can't get a guy nude, beat him up for not doing as he's told? You can't tell him to live on your property and listen to your orders and do all your chores all day? What you've been doing to me is illegal. I want you to move out, she muttered. A tear dribbled down her cheek and her voice wavered. Pack up your shit and bring the kids with you. Tell them it's a weekend trip. We'll figure out exactly how we're moving forward next week. I just want to be separated from you in the short term. I can't be around you. These last 2 weeks have been a nightmare for both of us. Okay, I said. Sounds good. I went up to our room whistling in a loud, jolly manner on my way up the stairs and snapping my fingers to the beat in my head. But once alone in the dark of my bedroom, listlessly packing my things, a deep and irresistible frown kept rising to my face, and within minutes, I was utterly silent. I frowned at my clothes as I folded them and packed them up. I frowned at the bed. I frowned at our wedding photos. I frowned at my parents' wedding photos and her parents' wedding photos, which we had hanging on either side of our own. I frowned at the small orange light coming from my bedside lamp. I frowned at the little drawer of my bedside table, which I may never use again. I wept quietly. This divorce was going to be hell in a handbasket. Okay. That was one. This next one is called Mark. Now, does anyone have any questions about anything we've just gone over? Officer Regina said, looking from the DARE lesson on the board and turning back to the class of 5th graders. Ayo, yeah, one kid said, raising his hand. This kid's name was Mark. The class braced themselves. Mark was the class clown, and always had something mischievous to say. And your name? Ayo, yeah, my name Mark, Mark said. All the signs that he was about to cheese rising to his features. What kind of gun you got? Excuse me? What kind of gun? Yo, what kind of gun you got, miss? The class bubbled into some laughter. Mrs. Auger, seeing the marks of rowdiness emerging among them, took this chance to cut in. Mark, do you have a real question for Officer Regina, or should we move on to someone else? Hey, yo, how is that not a real question? I said, what kind of gun you got, miss? What kind of gun you got? Take it out. Let's see it. Take it out. No, Officer Regina said firmly. We take gun safety extremely seriously. I never unholster my gun unless I intend to shoot somebody. Shoot me then, Mark said. And this made the entire class burst into laughter. He looked around, sitting comfortably back at his desk, looking coolly satisfied at the uproar he had inspired. Hey, if you can only take it out, if you use it, then shoot me then, miss. Ripples of rage crossed over Officer Regina's face as she watched Mark's smug expression. Mrs. Auger waved her hands and half-sternly calmed the class down. Now, Mark, was that really appropriate? Hey, sorry, Miss A, Mark muttered quickly, smiling, giving a composed shrug and picking up a pencil to draw yet another wank on the side of his DARE workbook. The workbook was already crowded, page after page, with hundreds of wanks, just like the inside of Mark's desk. Long after silence fell over the class, Officer Regina was still staring at Mark, transfixed. Mrs. Auger looked to her with some concern. Should we get back to that last point about peer pressure? But it was as if Officer Regina was frozen. Besides the twitching of her eyes and fingers, it was It was 30 seconds before Mark realized, glancing up from his workbook, "Hey, why are you staring at me, miss? You got a class to teach." "Your dad's a cop, isn't he, Mark?" "Di Lorenzo." She spoke in a small, brittle, quaking voice. "That's your last name, isn't it? He works in my department." "What if I told him you behaved this way today?" You wouldn't do shit. He told me if I ever got in trouble, he can make sure I get out of it, because I'm his kid, and he's always going to look out for me." "Italian scumbag," Officer Regina muttered. She almost didn't realize she had said it above her breath. She doubled down a little, raising her voice. "Just like your father. He brings in those big Italian sandwiches for lunch every day. Stuffs his face with pizza. Stinks up the place." The class looked at Officer Regina with horror and confusion. There were some tears in her eyes. She blinked rapidly and began to grimace with gathering rage at Mark. "He talks about you, Mark. Do you know that? He's proud of you. Heard you had a big season in Little League last year." "Hell yes, I did. Hit a walk-off in the championship, miss," Mark said, looking back to the wank he was working on. "With my new bat I got for Christmas, because that's how I do." "Officer Regina, are you all right?" Miss Auger asked. "Hey, Miss Regina, I heard you got scared and killed a guy by accident one time," Mark said. "My dad said girls don't make good cops because they get scared." The class burst into scattered laughter at this. In one reflexive moment, Officer Regina's eyes darted around to see who had laughed, while simultaneously shifting her hand at lightning speed to her waist in a fight-or-flight response for her weapon. Mrs. Auger watched this movement with alarm. A tear trailed down Officer Regina's cheek as she regained control of her body and pulled her hand away from her holster. Mark went home from school later that day and played GTA on his golden PSP for a few hours in his bedroom before riding his bike around town until the sunset granted everything: his driveway, his parents' cars, his brand new basketball hoop, a rich orange gold sheen. After that, he chilled with his mom and dad, watching some TV. His parents asked if he had been drawing wanks in the bathrooms at his elementary school all year, that one of the teachers had emailed them asking about it, and Mark simply shrugged, cheesed, and said no. He was absolutely jamming. The weather was perfect, and he could smell that a refreshing summer was coming right around the corner. He brushed his teeth, did an improvised yet wholly inspired and original 2-second-long dance at his bedside. He fell asleep 4 minutes after his head hit the pillow that night in his large upstairs bedroom, genuinely carefree.
The next reader is August LAMM. She's an artist and writer, and she's got 2 books coming out soon. One is a novel titled Lambing Season, and the other one is a nonfiction book. And there's a few copies of her instructional art book on the table for sale too.
Hi, yeah, I'm August. I'm going to read something that I wrote specifically for tonight. It's inspired by Tao and his efforts to heal himself. I also need some healing, which you'll hear about. It's called Fear and Self-Healing. There's no good way to deliver bad news, but there are worse ways. I was gearing up for another brief, monthly, calendar-invited sexual encounter with my long-term boyfriend when my doctor called. I picked up the phone, grateful. The scans were in. I had a degenerative spinal disease, which in my doctor's words, would gradually debilitate me until someone discovered a miracle cure, or I became eligible for assisted suicide. The first thing I did in the wake of my diagnosis was become religious. The second thing I did was break up with my boyfriend. In my eagerness to end things, I mistimed the conversation so he was heading into the bathroom, and then I had to deliver the bad news while he sat on the toilet, shitting and crying. Then I took him out for ice cream at Friendly's. We had to keep living together for 100 years until our lease expired. I started sleeping on the floor because I was the bad guy, and also because I thought I could self-heal my back. I was manic with exhaustion. Anything seemed possible. I was channeling Jesus. I was microdosing Tao Lin tweets. When the lease expired, my back was worse than ever, but still not bad enough for me to legally kill myself. Summer was blazing through New Haven. I brought my belongings out to bake on the front lawn. I rode on an empty shoebox, moving to France. The money was gone by the time I landed in Paris. I had to crash with internet strangers who volunteered to host me. You should always be wary of people like this. On the bright side, they were local, so I was integrated from the start. I even went to a French hospital once. It should have been twice, but for some reason I didn't go when I got a UTI from a sexual assault. Actually, it wasn't an assault, because I could have said no. Instead, I said nothing, and it went on for 100 years, and I felt really bad for myself the whole time. The reason I contracted a UTI was that the guy lived in one of those inexplicable European apartments where there's a sink in the bedroom, but the full bathroom with an actual toilet is on a different floor entirely. It's basically a UTI factory. So I fell asleep that night without pissing, and I woke up at dawn and went to the living room and called my friend Jamie in California, who was just about to go to bed, and I was like, dude, I think I have a UTI. And she was like, oh no, how does French healthcare work? By that point, I knew how French healthcare worked, because I'd already been to the hospital for gout, which runs in my family. I didn't know it was gout at the time, though. I thought it was just regular arthritis. So I watched a Jordan Peterson video and decided to go on a red meat diet. I took it very literally, and I was living off steak strips and red wine. And my foot got worse and worse, and that's how I landed in the hospital after failing to self-treat my gout. I also failed to self-treat my UTI. When I couldn't ignore the burning anymore, I went to an organic shop where I bought a giant glass bottle of cranberry juice. It wasn't the ruby red kind they give to children. It was the cloudy sour kind that ruins your enamel. I sat on the cobblestones outside Theo Van Gogh's house and forced myself to chug the entire bottle, which I believed would be equivalent to 3 antibiotic capsules. I stood up and crossed the road to a cafe. I ordered, then went to the bathroom while my panini was pressed. This wasn't your traditional old-world French cafe. It was one of those ubiquitous, unvarnished wood, Scandi places with the giant white tiles and white lights, which is how I learned what it might be like to throw up a gallon of cranberry juice in an Apple store. Let me tell you how I met the guy. A month into my stay in Paris, my mom flew over and rented us an Airbnb. I was grateful to not be crashing with internet people for once. My mom had this thing where ever since she married a rich guy, she couldn't stand middle-class people. Poor people were fine because they weren't people. But the middle class was a fresh memory. Now she was retired and sleeping in a French Airbnb that she claimed seemed unsafe. Unsafety was not something you could quantify nor contradict, especially if a woman was diagnosing it. On our first morning together, we went out for breakfast. I was still limping because of the gout. When we got to the cafe, my mom wrinkled her nose and said the floor was sticky, but I couldn't walk any further. I ordered a cheese board and my mom ordered a vodka. Behind her, I could see this guy marking his way through a stack of printed papers. There is nothing more attractive than a man who works with his hands. We kept making eye contact. He was attractive in that French way where it literally didn't matter what he looked like. He was going to be hot anyway. His worst features were assets, and his assets were also assets. When my mom got up to pay, I wrote my number on a scrap of notebook paper and handed it to the guy. Later that day, he texted. We made a plan. Then I had to wait 100 years for my mom to leave the country. When she finally left, I checked out of the Airbnb and went to go crash with an internet acquaintance who really liked my art. The price for crashing with this type of person is looking at their drawings and pretending they've got potential. I dropped off my bags and she handed me her sketchbook. It was a bunch of depressing flat drawings of hands and fruit. This one's really cool, I said, pointing at a random page. Then I went out to meet the cafe guy, whose name was Eve. We decided to meet at the same cafe. I got there early and ordered a glass of white wine. I started writing in my notebook so I would seem papery like him. After half an hour, I was nearing the end of the wine and the notebook. I was writing in tiny letters on the inside of the back cover. I needed Eve to see me writing. It was essential. I was freaking the fuck out. I couldn't feel the lower half of my body. I stood up to check if my legs still worked. They worked. Then I went outside to call New Haven Rheumatology. The receptionist picked up. I said I was a patient of Dr. D. Sabatino's. For the first time in recorded history, the doctor was available and could take my call immediately. I asked him if I should be concerned about paralysis. The doctor considered this for a moment, then said, I shouldn't think so. I said, but should I think so? He paused and said, I don't think so. I hung up. It was a really expensive call. Then I saw Eve walking up the street toward me. He was 100 years late. He didn't apologize and never would. It was not in his arsenal. When I mentioned our earlier flirtation, he clarified that he hadn't been intentionally making eye contact with me. He hadn't even been aware of me until I gave him my number. This was objectively humiliating, but I talked myself out of it. We went back to his apartment, the one with the disambiguated bathroom, and had the weird sex and fell asleep, and then I woke up and made the phone call to my friend at dawn, and then I remembered, fuck, I was supposed to spend the night at the internet girl's place. I hadn't even texted her to say I was staying out. She seemed really into my art. You can't mistreat a fan, not in this day and age. I left Eve's apartment in the early morning and decided to buy flowers for the girl by way of apology. I got on the commuter train with a bouquet of red roses, clearly the wrong choice. Between the second and third stations, the train fully stopped and didn't start up again. It stayed there for 100 years. At first, I tried looking straight ahead of the seat back in front of me, pretending I was a passenger on a moving train. Then I decided to settle in a bit. I looked around. Everyone else was also looking around, raising their eyebrows at each other in congenial exasperation, like, it's always something. Then they started saying French things I didn't understand, but slowly I learned. This is how my French got really good. Imagine if the rest of the story were in French. We started volleying French colloquialisms up and down the carriage. We could have easily switched seats or even moved into a different carriage, but everyone stayed put. We were a family. I had a bank of 3 seats to myself, which was great for sleeping. The seats were made of textured blue polyester. After a few months, the fabric began to stink. There was no laundry on board. The bathroom was excellent, though. A year in, the tap still worked. It was probably just the same water being recycled over and over again. We'd taken to hanging our wet clothes from the luggage racks. Most people only had the clothes they'd been wearing when they boarded, so we all had to get comfy with nudity, especially once our clothes wore out and there was nothing to cover ourselves with. When we had our first death 10 years in, we passed the body out through a narrow safety gap at the top of the window, like a piece of mail. It was Laurent's. He fit through the slot pretty easily. Because he was so skinny, we were all starving, but then he just flopped right down next to the train. Talk about smell. Around year 20, I stopped thinking about Eve. Half a century in, I stopped being stressed about showing up late to the internet girl's flat. The red roses had dried to a dusty pink, and they hung above my seat like mistletoe. I never kissed anyone or had sex. It wasn't that kind of train. 75 years in, my UTI cleared up. And in the absence of social media, my gout cleared up too. My spine still hurt, but I no longer wanted to kill myself. I was healthy, I nurtured my friendships, I slept well, I stayed put. I lived this way for 100 years until I realized what I was missing. Thank you.
Raise your hand if you want to have a 10 to 15 minute break. Raise your hand if you don't want to have a 10 to 15 minute break. All right, let's not have a 10 to 15 minute break. Our next reader is Jordan Castro, the 25% Filipino novelist. That's not a joke, he really is that. And he's the author of The Novelist and the forthcoming novel, Muscle Man.
Thanks, Tao. Yeah, happy to be here. Great job, everyone, so far. I'm going to read just some old MUUMUU House greatest hits, and then I'm retiring from reading for like a year or more. This is called Fuckboy Russell. My friend Russell used to think that the word fuckboy meant one who fucks with something. Fuck with meaning to like. He would say things, for example, like, I fuck with that song, I'm a fuckboy. Or, nice shirt, I'm a fuckboy. I had recently gotten out of rehab and Russell was helping me to not do heroin. Stay close to God and perform his work well, he would say, and the rest will be provided. Another thing, have you had their corned beef? I'm a fuckboy. This is called Gardeners. They planned to have a garden, but everything they planted died. They planted kale, but but it died. They planted tomatoes, but they died. They consulted gardening books, the internet, even their old alcoholic neighbor, but every new thing the couple tried failed. This is called Dog. When my younger brother Brett and I were children, we played a game regularly and with much enthusiasm called Dog. Brett pretended to be a dog, and I pretended to be his owner. This is called Fear. Nearly every morning, a woman comes running out of her house with her face, skin, and her robe flapping wildly. She cries out, help me, it's an emergency, and one of us runs to help her. We know she is making it up, nothing has really happened to her, but we understand, how could we not? This is called, at the end of the week during which his grandmother died, his girlfriend had a nervous breakdown and he fell behind at work and felt lethargic. He surprised himself by Googling best legal testosterone boosters. This is called a compassionate man. A man who prided himself on his compassionate nature and who identified compassion as the single greatest motivator, screamed while pumping his fist in the air with the fists of other compassionate men. They shouted compassionate slogans, spit flying from their compassionate mouths, their compassionate faces contorting, compassionate voices hoarse and indistinct. When they came upon a man without compassion, easily identified by his lower fist, closed lips, and curiously singular behavior, they beat him. This is called massaging my father. I sit on his butt and rub while he groans. He was lying face down on the floor. We are in front of the television. Blue Bloods is on. When I finish, he gives me $10. This is called massaging my father too. I sit on the bed in the guest room responding to an overdue email and looking at my secret anonymous Twitter when my father's voice calls up the stairs. Jay, you want to make a couple bucks? All right, I just got a couple more. I'm gonna, these are some selected tweets from my selected tweets on the MUUMUU House website from my last day of high school. May 6th, just finished my last day. Well, it's not for my last day, it's whatever, it's shortly thereafter. May 6th, just finished my last day of high school. May 16, slept around 3 seconds and woke experiencing a distinct, real-seeming memory of me telling a stoic Native American man to, quote, leave my cars alone. May 26, feel like a weird, retarded sea urchin with an abnormally long neck who sees things around 6% slower than all other sea urchins. May 30th, imagined Eddie Murphy floating in a park with a turtle shell on his back. June 26th, closed my eyes and imagined the stoic, strong-seeming Native American face moving slowly into my face. July 27th. Can't remember what a living turkey looks like. All right, yeah, 2 more. Thanks, everyone. This is called Climate Child. A 16-year-old who, before her meteoric rise to superstardom, quote, had no energy, no friends, and didn't speak to anyone, end quote, who, prior to school striking, quote, just sat alone at home with an eating disorder, end quote, became a messianic figure to many when she rode a solar-powered yacht across the ocean with her parents, successful in film and theater, to the UN Climate Action Summit, where she gave a speech in which she said, among other things, I shouldn't be up here. This is called scholarship. His novels were nearly unanimously viewed as bleak, nihilistic, depressing, anarchic, grim, hopeless, misanthropic, despairing, trauma-inspired, pessimistic, contradictory, incoherent, wrathful, provocative, seething, unpleasant, demonic, unsettling, dispiriting, morbid, dismal, resentful, morose, jaundiced, acrimonious, mirthless, disquieting, curmudgeonly, cantankerous, cynical, confusing, and dark. What do we have last? This is called Chat During Live Stream Church. Peace of Christ. Christ's peace. Peace be with you. Peace be with you. Good morning and peace to all. Peace. The peace of his presence be to all of us. God's peace, everyone.
Next, we have the actress, director, podcaster, and autofictionist, Dasha and NEKRASOVA.
Hi. Thank you, Tao, for doing this. Thanks, everybody, for reading. I wrote a story. I don't really know why. It's not autofiction. Okay. But it is about an actor. If Peter is still here. Okay. The actor had at some point enjoyed what could be called prestige, and even now, as his reputation for being difficult, though not yet impossible, preceded him, due to his adherence and devotion to what was commonly referred to as the method, he was currently and consistently employed. The method, he had been taught and believed, was a conduit to the extraordinary, a quality found to be in rare supply in the world and in himself and in others. Before he had begun to refine his craft through adherence to the techniques and philosophies that comprised the method, the actor had achieved a non-insignificant amount of celebrity first through his work on a television show for children and then as a beloved comedic fixture on a long-running sitcom. He did not then have the reputation he did now for being difficult, and there were not many emotional demands made on him or his work. The feelings the actor had then about himself and perceived on the faces of people who recognized him with increasing frequency was that he was not a serious person and was in fact a joke. The method was a way for him to redeem himself, to become not only serious but extraordinary, a conduit for extraordinary things so rare in the world and in himself. His colleagues, employers, and agents, amongst whom the sentiment was that the actor was increasingly difficult, did not understand neither the means nor the ends of the method and did not care for the extraordinary. The method didn't appear to the professionals with which the actor worked to be a conduit for much at all, besides his own needless torture. Before that, but after the actor had moved to Los Angeles, after he had emancipated himself from his family, with whom he no longer spoke, but before many terrible things would happen to him, in small rooms and on leather couches in the valley, and later in bigger rooms in the comfortable homes of Hollywood producers and ephebophiles, who did not know then that the actor was not merely talented, but a conduit to the extraordinary, with which his destiny was enmeshed. This extraordinary thing that was inside of him, capable of being expressed, even if only once, as long as someone was there to see it. And if enough people could see it, this secret, extraordinary thing could change their lives. But for people to see it, they had to see the actor, and it was at that point not within the actor's power to be seen. And so he found himself in these rooms with these men he hoped could aid him in this task of being seen. Though they themselves did not really see the actor for what he really was, extraordinary, or rather a conduit for extraordinary things, but mainly for his young and unblemished body. But before that, when the actor had just come to Los Angeles and did not yet know about the method, only that there was something distinct and charming in him that people seemed to respond to. This quality aided the harmony of his facial features to make the actor viable, professionally and commercially, and he had found it easy to work. The actor's family, who he didn't particularly like to think about, was from Modesto and did not contest his bid to emancipate himself from them. The first apartment the actor leased when he was still a teenager was a carpeted and unclean room at ground level with vertical blinds in a complex in Burbank. The building was 2 stories with a narrow exterior corridor along its second level that overlooked a small courtyard with a shallow and heavily chlorinated pool. Not long after the actor had moved to Burbank, he encountered a man weeping in the courtyard on a hot and particularly dark night. He did not like to think about it, but he found he frequently did, though the event itself was brief and so long ago and not of any seeming or lasting significance in his life. He couldn't remember the man's face, just the grief in it and the pain, sobs, and sounds he emitted almost like an animal. "Hey man," he said when he saw the actor, who attempted to avoid him. "Come over here." The man wasn't old, not yet even middle-aged, but dressed youthfully as if he hoped to present younger than he was. When the actor approached, he saw that the man was extremely drunk, his eyes big and wet and glassy and struggling to focus. The man wailed in a way that resembled language, in a tone that oscillated between agony and anger. The actor gathered that the man was himself also an actor, and that things in his life had not turned out the way the man had hoped. The man felt that he at one point had great promise, and that this promise would be fulfilled in the fullness of a long career in the entertainment industry, but that this promise had gotten smaller and more remote, and the opportunities he thought he had foreclosed gradually, becoming fewer and fewer, and he felt not only foolish and delusional, but exploited and targeted, as if the misfortunes of his life were coordinated and the world conspired against him and his talents deliberately. "Come here," the man said again, grasping towards the actor in the darkness with a haunted expression. He grabbed his hands, clasping them in his. "Do you feel that?" The man's hands were wet. "Feel my tears, bro." The actor, for whom opportunities had yet to foreclose and who still believed in his own ineffable promise, had the impression then that this man was a loser. Feeling the man's damp hands caused the actor to recoil. The man's life, his confusion and failures were simply illegible to the actor, and he felt faintly pity, but more vividly a sense that prolonged contact with the man, his tears, and tragic, palpable loserdom, like leprosy, would somehow contaminate the actor, jeopardizing his own good fortune. Though the actor was at this point very young and would not long after experience remarkable success, thoughts of the man in his wet hands, reaching out for consolation in the dark, the smell of chlorine, would never leave him. This story is long, I'm sorry. And it's like not funny. As he approached the second half of the expected length of his life, the actor began to experience an increasing unease, and though he was by no professional metric of failure, he no longer felt the prismatic potential of his destiny unfolding, but rather that his by now middling fame was an indistinct burden, a made bed in which he couldn't bear to lie. In part due to his young celebrity, the actor had been unable to form meaningful relationships, and when he felt lonely, as he often did, he would summon young women to his expensive Laurel Canyon home via an app that paired so-called creative professionals together with some discretion. Many women wanted to have sex with the actor, though his fame was by now middling, because they were stupid. Besides the immediate novelty of having sex with a celebrity, there was a deeper narcissistic fulfillment they hoped to achieve through intimate contact with someone famous. In his middle age, the actor was pleased to find that many of the young women he had sex with not only tolerated, but seemed to have conditioned themselves to perform enjoyment of various degrading sex acts with a ubiquitous and pornographic enthusiasm. The low opinion he had of his sex partners didn't concern the actor, as he felt they did not really see him, and much like sex itself, which was obscured by the modes and postures of pornography, saw only in him a false value conferred by his secretly pathetic fame. The more adoration they looked at him with, the less seen he felt, and gradually the actor adopted a more and more punishing disposition towards these women, who in his esteem were worse than whores because they didn't even want money, but instead to merely be recognized by someone that they recognized. Though they were often and obviously attractive, many of the women themselves aspiring actresses, the actor found it challenging to maintain interaction at the sight of their eager and adulating faces, and had taken to habitual and forceful smothering, depriving them not only of air, but of what he imagined they sought to gain from the recognition of someone they recognized, a moment of contact with something the actor didn't really have. It was in this era of his life that the actor became interested in a more systematic approach to his craft. The method in which he was instructed was developed by a Russian in the early part of the prior century and was controversial and maligned then and now. To say the actor had become disenchanted with his work would be inaccurate, as it never had been especially enchanted for him to begin with. However, over the course of his long and unfulfilling career, made all the more bleak by the loneliness of his celebrity, he felt he had lost agency, and due to the clownish roles in which he was cast and through which he rose to prominence, most of his human dignity. The method was first and foremost serious, a project that promised a technique through which the actor's will was crucial to its chief task, to be a conduit to the extraordinary. That everyone basically found this laughable, its mysterious and torturous techniques pretentious, and that the actor's redemptive hopes in becoming a practitioner of the method did not give the impression that he was serious, but in fact in the throes of a midlife crisis, was lost on him. Much like the punishing attitude the actor had adopted towards those who deigned to know him intimately, his new immersive and willful approach to his professional life was retaliatory and sadomasochistic. To the frustration of his agents, the actor began to turn down the lucrative work to which he was suited, opting instead to act in low to mid-budget independent dramas, delivering overwrought and indulgent performances under the pretense of giving life to his most authentic torments. It was in this way the actor found himself cast in the role of an alcoholic Catholic priest, a witness to a satanic ritual at the Vatican, which caused him, the priest, to question not only his sanity, but his faith. The script was confusing, and the production unprofessional, but the actor was the most famous person attached, and this afforded him plentiful opportunities to inflict himself and his twisted techniques on his colleagues. His approach was immersive, and the actor felt strongly that the only way to convey the priest's agony was to lose himself in it. His passing familiarity with Catholics was gleaned from movies like The Da Vinci Code, which intrigued him initially as he understood that religion sanctioned various mortifications and masochistic rituals. The actor was unbaptized and had never known a priest. He considered himself to be a spiritual person and partook in the Californian practices of yoga and meditation. If he was honest, the actor thought Christianity was boring and for losers. He had been told by Christians he had encountered in his life that God so loved the world he sacrificed his son, Jesus, and if he believed in him, he wouldn't perish, and that this was good news. But this all seemed implausible to the actor, who in many ways felt he had already perished. He did not like to dwell on those ways, nor on his death, and especially not sin, and he did not like the look on the faces of Christians when they told him their so-called good news, which made him feel inadequate, confused, and afraid. The role was challenging for the actor to inhibit for these reasons, though he felt his weight gain and bloated drunk look were impressive, and he liked to don the priest costume in the scenes in which he was explosively angry or in morbid despair. In the absence of moral extremes, however, the priest and his interior life felt obscure. The actor also learned that Catholics believed in something called transubstantiation, that through prayer and invocation, a priest was able to change bread and wine literally into the body and blood of Jesus. He found this to be not only implausible, but creepy and frankly gross. The actor planned to attend at least one Mass in preparation for his role, but the thought of Eucharistic presence made him feel anxious and sick. The actor was now nearing the end of his time on the film and was lingering one afternoon in his trailer. An assistant stood outside waiting for the actor to emerge and be escorted to set, a small fake church in which we see the priest in silent, humble prayer, contemplating the satanic atrocities he had witnessed. The director and crew stood by, the scene lit with a stand-in who knelt patiently in place. The actor, in his dedication to the role, and per his understanding of the method, had developed a serious drinking problem, and was, though the scene did not require it, belligerently drunk. The actor's alcoholism was by now common knowledge, and though he had at many points behaved monstrously and was generally volatile, bordering on dangerous, the production accommodated him because they had no choice. When he was brought to set, he could barely stand, and the director pleaded with him to get in position. The actor closed his eyes, clasping his hands together, indicating prayer. He was meant to fix his gaze upward toward heaven, conveying his helplessness and spiritual turmoil. The actor kept his eyes closed and held himself very still, as if he were dead. Once it were clear the actor wouldn't or perhaps couldn't open his eyes, the director called cut. The actor just still didn't move. He didn't know he had been crying until he felt his own wet, intertwined hands. God have mercy on us, he said. God have mercy on us all.
I'm going to talk about my cat, Nimi. He's back home in Hawaii. He's 3 years old. He's autistic. People might think I'm just saying that because I talk about autism a lot. But really, this makes me less likely to call things autistic, I feel like, because I know people are thinking I'm just going to call everything autistic. But Nini really is autistic. It's anyone who hangs out with him for a while will think he's autistic. He has deficits in social interaction and communication. Because I have 3 cats and they're siblings, and Nini will go up to the other cats and paw them, and then other cats will just walk away or sometimes hiss at him. One of the cats ran away, so there's just 2 cats now. The other one is Lolly, and whenever Lolly shows up, like when she comes home, Nini's attention will go really strongly towards Lolly, and he'll follow her, but Lolly will just ignore him, and he'll sniff her butt a lot, and Lolly doesn't like this, and she'll hiss at him. I think he might be doing that because of his microbiome, because poop contains a lot of microbes, so Nini might be just instinctually trying to change his microbiome, but Lolly doesn't like it. And Nini, he has eczema, which is a symptom of autism, or it's not a symptom, but it's one of the things that autistic people often have. I think it's because their bile is leaking into their blood and it's being excreted through weak areas on their skin. So Nini has eczema and he licks himself. Usually he's really quiet, but when he licks himself, it's the only time that he's loud. And here's a recording of him licking and cleaning himself, probably scratching himself. I've had eczema for a long time, so I really relate to Nini on this. His jaw is underdeveloped, I think, because normally he'll just have his tongue out a little bit, because his jaw is supposed to be like longer, and he does that. I've noticed this in myself when I get, in the past when I got really stoned and was alone, I would just have my tongue out like, it's because my jaw is supposed to be longer and it's supposed to fit like that, but instead I just pull it back and it blocks my throat a little. That happens to Nini too. That's why he's so loud when he's cleaning himself. And he doesn't jump onto things. He'll only jump like twice his height, and he's around twice as short as his siblings. And people might be wondering why he has autism. I believe autism is not genetic, like most people think. But when Nini was a baby, he had 5 siblings, and only 2 other ones survived. The other ones, I think they just starved to death in the wild. And Nini probably just barely made it, so he was really malnourished. And then the people who found him, they put him in a cage for 2 weeks, feeding him store-bought cat food, and that probably contributed to his autism too. Last year, Nini bit me 3 times, really hard. It started when I found out that I could scratch his butt and like the top of his leg, and he would really, really like it. And when he feels pleasure, he just starts licking his paws, his front paw, and that's another symptom of autism, repetitive behaviors. So I was scratching Nini's butt area, and suddenly he seemed to feel so much pleasure that his body like seized up, and he just lost control of his body and started biting things, and he bit my hand. And over 3 days, the bite, it got bigger, because it seems like cats, for some reason, their bites are more toxic than normal. And when he bit me, I was laughing a lot, because it was so unlike his behavior as the most gentle cat I've seen. It was like seeing the Dalai Lama like really upset and attacking people. But then I got worried about my bite. It was big, and I was looking up info on the internet. And it seemed like people were saying that cat bites are really toxic and you can die from it if you don't go to the hospital. But I also read stuff about how people went to the hospital and they got, I forget exactly, but something like multiple types of antibiotics. And then they suffered for like months trying to recover from these antibiotics. So I didn't want to go to see anyone. And it turned out that it just healed itself. And I just felt more secure, or just more convinced that mainstream doctors and hospitals can't help me, and they'll just make things worse. And he bit me again 2 weeks later, the same reason. I was scratching his area. I was careful to make sure I wouldn't get bit, but somehow it happened, and it was hard to tell people about this. I told my parents, and they seemed worried. And I told Jordan, the other reader tonight, and he said, quote, "Maybe Mimi doesn't want your crotch rubs." I thought it would be funny if he didn't. Funny in a dark way, but I feel like he definitely did like him, I think. My other cat, Lolly, likes being rubbed there, and she's really not autistic. She's like the opposite of Mimi, and instead of licking her paws when she feels pleasure, she just sort of moves her head around. She's like, and Mimi actually bit me a third time. And then that was the last time. But since then, I've noticed that sometimes he'll set this off on himself when he's just licking his crotch. And then he'll suddenly just spasm and fall on his back and seem to have a seizure or something. And then he just recovers. I'm working on his eczema though. I think it was caused by vitamin A toxicity, because I fed him cheese and ghee every day, ever since getting him pretty much when he was 6 weeks old. And I just recently learned that vitamin A might not be good, and it's high in dairy. And last year, after the biting incidents, he became paralyzed for an unknown reason. One day I just noticed in the kitchen he just was falling down, and I didn't pay much attention to him. And I moved him to my bed, and later that night I heard him falling off the bed and struggling to get away or something. And then the next day I couldn't find him, and he was under my house. In Hawaii, a lot of houses, there's a few feet of, it's like the stage, there's a few feet of nothing under it, and Mimi had crawled all the way to the very center of the bottom of the house. I think probably because he knew that he wasn't able to move that well, so he's really scared of things falling on him, like trees and stuff, so he probably felt safe under there. And I went down there and brought him inside, and he was drooling a lot. His paws were wet and cold because of the drool, and it seemed like it was his front legs that were paralyzed. And this is a symptom of vitamin A toxicity. And then I took care of him. I was around him 24 hours a day. Besides when I went to town for an hour. And I gave him physical therapy, just holding his front paws and letting him exercise his back feet. And I did look up vets, and I contacted 2 vets. One of them was closed, and the other one said that they weren't taking on new customers. But I had also looked online, and it seemed like if I had brought him to a vet, they would just have done a lot of tests on him and maybe given him antibiotics and other things. And Mimi has never been to a vet. so it would have been really scary for him. But fortunately, he just started getting better on his own, like my hand had when he bit it. And I felt really happy when he was getting better. But I also wasn't that worried when he was paralyzed. I really liked taking care of him. And at one point I remember thinking that I could understand how someone would deliberately paralyze another person that they really liked just to keep them around and take care of them. And I knew that I wouldn't do something like that. That's just, it's really not fair to the person. But I felt like there was a movie out there that was like this, but maybe there isn't, but it could be a good movie plot. That's it. Thanks for coming in. You can buy books, and I have prints of my mandalas over there on the table, and if you want one, you can take one and then find me, and I'm selling them for a discounted price of $30. And Writer's Life Tip, I think he's selling autographs. You can just go up to him and ask him about that. I think that's it. Yeah, thank you for coming.